Hey everyone, we're working hard to get our first 1,000 subscribers, sign up and you won't regret it. I didn't hear about the auction from my wife. I heard about it from a junior analyst who barely knew my name and looked like he wanted to crawl into the elevator shaft after he pressed the button. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just said, quietly, that maybe I shouldn't go up to the ballroom yet. That maybe I should take a minute. That was the first warning I ignored. The second was my phone. 12 missed calls. A string of messages from coworkers who had never texted me outside of work hours. None of them said what happened. They didn't have to. When people avoid words, it's usually because the words are sharp. I went up anyway. The New Year's party was supposed to be harmless. Hotel ballroom, open bar, company-branded champagne flutes. The kind of thing HR pretends builds culture and everyone else treats like a sanctioned blackout. My wife, Sabrina, had been excited all week. She worked in marketing, which meant her team planned the party and drank hardest at it. I'd stayed late finishing a client report. I remember thinking I'd swing by, kiss her cheek, leave early. Be the responsible husband. The boring one. I didn't know I'd already become the punchline. When the elevator doors opened, the noise hit first. Laughter that wasn't warm. Music turned up too loud to discourage conversation. Someone cheering, like at a game show. I stepped out and saw a crowd gathered near the small stage at the front of the room. Phones were up. People were filming. That should have stopped me. Instead, it pulled me in. I recognized Sabrina before I recognized myself in the story. She was on the stage, one heel kicked off, hair loose, face flushed the way it only got when she drank too much and forgot who she was performing for. Someone had handed her a microphone. Someone else had given her attention. And she was enjoying it. I didn't hear every word at first. Just fragments. My name. A laugh that went on too long. Then the sentence landed, clear as glass breaking. An auction. A joke, she thought. A bit. Who would buy a night with her husband? Starting at 50 cents. The word loser floated through the room like confetti. I stopped walking. People noticed me in stages. A few faces changed. A few phones dipped, then rose again, like they couldn't decide if this was better content. Someone near the bar whispered something that made another person wince. Sabrina didn't see me right away. She was scanning the crowd, playing it up, waiting for bids that came faster than they should have. Coins tossed on the stage. Someone waved $1. Someone else laughed and doubled it. I stood there, holding my coat, thinking about the last time she'd asked me to come to one of these things. Thinking about how she'd said it mattered to her career that I show up. Thinking about how I'd believed her. By the time she spotted me, the room had already decided what this was. Her smile faltered. Just a fraction. Enough that I saw the calculation behind it. The split-second choice between stopping and leaning in. She leaned in. She said something else into the microphone. I didn't catch it. The crowd roared anyway. Someone clapped me on the shoulder like we were in on the same joke. I didn't react the way people expected. I didn't storm the stage. I didn't shout. I didn't leave. I smiled. That surprised her more than anything else. I raised my hand. Not high. Just enough to be seen. The room quieted, slowly. People love a reversal. They love to see if the humiliated person will perform too. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Someone nearby said my name out loud, and suddenly everyone remembered who I was. The guy who handled the firm's largest clients. The one who never drank too much. The one who didn't belong on that stage. Sabrina laughed again, too sharp this time. She made a show of bowing toward me, like I'd joined the act. Like this was safe. That was when Leonard stepped forward. Leonard wasn't HR. He wasn't marketing. He was the senior partner who signed checks and decided who stayed after budget reviews. He took the microphone from Sabrina with a calm that felt practiced. He didn't look at her when he spoke. He looked at me. He said the auction was over. He said this wasn't appropriate. He said we should all get back to celebrating. The crowd dispersed with visible disappointment. People hate being denied a conclusion. Sabrina stepped off the stage, wobbling slightly. She reached for my arm, whispered something I didn't hear. An apology, maybe. A joke. A promise. I let her touch me. That mattered later. Leonard asked if we could talk privately. His tone wasn't angry. It was careful. That should have scared me more. We walked toward a side corridor, away from the music. As we passed the bar, I noticed something on the counter. A small stack of cash. Coins mixed in. Someone had written my name on a napkin beneath it, like this had been organized. That was when the humiliation finally reached me. Leonard stopped near the exit and said there were things I needed to know. Things that didn't start tonight. Things that made the auction less spontaneous than it looked. He said this wasn't the first time my name had come up like this. And then he said Sabrina wasn't the one who suggested it. That was the moment the night changed shape. Because suddenly, the joke wasn't about me anymore. Leonard didn't rush what he was about to say. That was the worst part. He waited until the door to the corridor clicked shut behind us, cutting off the music, the laughter, the countdown clock projected in the ballroom. In that quiet, my pulse suddenly felt loud. Embarrassment does that, it sharpens everything. He asked if I was okay. I nodded. It was a reflex. The same one I'd used in meetings for years when clients said something insulting and expected me to swallow it. Leonard watched my face carefully, like he didn't quite believe me, but he moved on. He said the idea for the auction hadn't come from Sabrina. Not originally. It had come up earlier in the evening, as a joke among a small group. A group that included 2 senior managers from another department. People who thought they were untouchable because they billed well and drank with the right partners. Leonard said my name had been mentioned casually at first. As an example. The safe husband. The guy who wouldn't make a scene. That sentence stuck with me. He told me Sabrina had been drunk when they approached her. That she laughed at first. That she said no. That part almost made me feel better, until he added that they'd framed it as harmless, as networking, as the kind of self-deprecating humor that made people memorable in the firm. Leonard didn't say it, but I understood what that meant. Career leverage. Social pressure. A room full of people watching to see if you'd play along. He said Sabrina hadn't come up with the wording. She hadn't invented the cruelty. She'd just agreed to deliver it. I thought about the napkin on the bar. The cash. The way people had been ready, waiting. This hadn't been a spontaneous lapse. It had been staged. Leonard said HR would be involved. He said there would be consequences. He said he was sorry I'd been put in that position. Then he said something that changed how I looked at the last 10 years of my life. He said this wasn't the first complaint involving Sabrina and blurred lines at company events. I asked him what that meant. He hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any accusation. Then he said there had been rumors. That she was close with certain managers. That jokes crossed into something else. That boundaries weren't always clear. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger yet. Something heavier. Like realizing a room you've lived in for years has been quietly filling with water. Leonard said he was telling me this because it might come out later, and he didn't want me blindsided. He said he'd handle the professional side. What I did personally was up to me. We walked back into the ballroom together. Midnight was minutes away. People were lining up champagne glasses like nothing had happened. Sabrina found me immediately. Her face had shifted from performative confidence to panic. She grabbed my hand too tightly, whispering that it was a joke, that everyone was drunk, that I knew how these things got out of hand. I looked at her and realized something unsettling. She wasn't embarrassed. She was scared. Not of what she'd done, but of who had seen it. We left early. In the car, she cried. Loudly. Apologetically. She said she didn't mean it. She said she didn't remember exactly what she'd said. She said she'd fix it. I drove. I didn't speak. At home, she followed me from room to room, still talking. Still explaining. She blamed the open bar. She blamed the managers. She blamed the culture. At one point, she blamed me, said I was always so calm that she forgot how things might land. That was the moment something inside me closed. I went to the guest room and locked the door. I didn't sleep much. Around 3 a.m, my phone buzzed. A message from a coworker I barely interacted with. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known how bad things were at home. He said he hoped I was okay. I stared at that line for a long time. I hadn't told anyone things were bad at home. Over the next few days, pieces started falling into place without me touching them. People avoided Sabrina at work. Conversation stopped when she walked into rooms. She came home frustrated, angry, confused by how fast the mood had shifted. I stayed quiet. Observant. I noticed how often she checked her phone now. How she took calls in the other room. How defensive she got when I asked simple questions. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, her tablet lit up on the kitchen counter. A calendar reminder popped up. Not work-related. Not shared. Just a location. A name I recognized from Leonard's story. I didn't open anything. I didn't need to. Because suddenly, the auction made sense. Not as a joke. As a test. That night, Sabrina sat across from me at dinner and asked if I was going to forgive her. She said couples survived worse. She said this didn't have to define us. I looked at her and realized she was right about one thing. This didn't have to define us. But it was going to end us. I told her I needed time. I told her I wasn't ready to talk. She nodded, relieved, mistaking restraint for weakness. She went to bed early. I stayed up, opened my laptop, and started answering questions I hadn't known to ask before. By the time the sun came up, I understood exactly why they'd chosen me for that stage. and exactly how wrong they'd been. There's a particular kind of clarity that comes when you stop trying to save something. I didn't confront Sabrina. Not yet. I didn't accuse, demand, or even ask. I did what I've always done best. I gathered information quietly and let people reveal themselves. It didn't take long. Once you start paying attention, patterns stop hiding. Her late meetings lined up neatly with calendar gaps. Work trips that used to include frantic updates now came with silence. She guarded her phone like it contained something fragile, not just private. I wasn't snooping. I didn't need to. She'd grown careless. People always do when they think the other person is still playing defense. At work, things shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Leonard kept his word. The senior managers who'd pushed the auction were suddenly busy. One was reassigned. Another stopped showing up to meetings altogether. HR moved quietly, methodically. No announcements. Just consequences. What surprised me wasn't that people were punished. It was how many people came to me afterward. Not to gossip. To apologize. People I'd worked alongside for years admitted they'd heard things. Jokes. Assumptions. That Sabrina liked attention. That she blurred lines. That I was either unaware or complicit. The word loser hadn't come from nowhere. It had been built, slowly, on a story other people told about me. I let that sit. One evening, Sabrina came home in a mood I hadn't seen before, tight, defensive, rehearsed. She said HR had asked questions. She said people were turning on her unfairly. She said I needed to support her now more than ever. I asked her what exactly they were asking about. She hesitated. Then gave an answer that was too vague to be true. That night, after she fell asleep, her phone lit up on the nightstand. A message preview flashed. Just a name. The same one from the calendar reminder. The same one Leonard had carefully avoided naming. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't need to anymore. The next day, Leonard asked me to come by his office. He didn't offer coffee this time. He didn't pretend this was casual. He said HR had finished their review. He said Sabrina was being put on leave pending further action. He said the firm couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. I asked him how long this had been going on. He said longer than the auction. Shorter than our marriage. That answer hollowed me out. Then he told me something he probably shouldn't have. He said one of the managers involved had claimed Sabrina believed I knew. That she'd said I was fine with it as long as it didn't affect her career. I laughed. Out loud. It surprised both of us. Leonard didn't laugh back. He asked me what I planned to do next. I told him the truth. I said I wasn't sure. But I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to humiliate her publicly. I'd already been on that stage. He nodded. Said sometimes restraint did more damage than anger. That night, I invited Sabrina to sit with me at the kitchen table. No accusations. No raised voice. Just a quiet space she couldn't perform her way out of. I asked her if there was anything she wanted to tell me before things got more complicated. She stared at the table. Then she cried. Real tears this time. She admitted to one affair. Just one. She framed it as a mistake. A lapse. Something that had already ended. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Then I asked her about the others. She looked up too fast. That was my answer. She denied it, of course. She minimized. She reframed. She said I was reaching. She said the auction was the worst thing she'd done and it would never happen again. I told her I believed she was sorry. That confused her. I told her I just didn't believe she was honest. She slept in the guest room that night. 2 days later, she packed a bag and said she was staying with a friend to give me space. I helped her carry it to the car. She kissed my cheek like we were still on the same team. As soon as she left, I did something I should have done years ago. I checked the shared financial accounts. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize. Small enough to hide. Frequent enough to matter. Hotel charges disguised as work expenses. Gifts that never came home. It wasn't just betrayal. It was planning. I printed everything. Labeled it. Organized it the way I organize client files, clean, unemotional, precise. Then my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, the voice on the other end said my name carefully, like he'd practiced. He said he thought I deserved to know something before I heard it elsewhere. He said Sabrina hadn't just crossed lines at work. She'd crossed one that involved money. My money. And his. He said he hadn't realized how deep it went until HR started asking questions. He said he was willing to tell me everything, messages, dates, receipts. Not out of guilt. Out of fear. Because he'd just been told the firm was cooperating with an external audit. And suddenly, the auction didn't look like humiliation anymore. It looked like a warning shot. And I was about to find out who it had really been aimed at. I met him the next morning. Not at the office. Not at a bar. A quiet cafe halfway between our neighborhoods, the kind of place people choose when they don't want to be seen but also don't want to look like they're hiding. He arrived early. That told me everything I needed to know. He didn't look like a villain. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from keeping too many stories straight. He ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. He didn't apologize. He didn't insult me either. He slid his phone across the table and said he'd already backed everything up. Messages. Photos. Travel records. Expense reports that didn't belong to business trips. He said Sabrina had convinced him I knew. That our marriage was open in practice. That I preferred not to be involved. He said she'd framed it as modern, mutual, mature. I told him that was a lie. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. Then he told me the part that turned my stomach. He said Sabrina hadn't just spent my money. She'd used his access too. Company cards. Reimbursements. He said she was careful, never too much at once, never anything obviously personal. He said she'd coached him on how to code things. He said the auction hadn't been a joke. It had been leverage. If I'd reacted badly, if I'd exploded, threatened, embarrassed the firm, she could have framed me as unstable. Difficult. A liability. If I'd laughed it off, she'd have proof I was fine with the dynamic. Either way, she was protecting herself. I thanked him. That surprised him more than anything else. Over the next week, everything accelerated. The audit widened. HR's quiet questions turned formal. 2 managers resigned. 1 was escorted out. Sabrina's leave became a termination. She came home once to collect more things. She tried to talk. She said people had turned against her. She said the firm was scapegoating her to save itself. I didn't argue. I handed her copies of the financial records. She went very still. She asked where I got them. I told her it didn't matter. That night, I filed for divorce. No theatrics. No social media posts. Just paperwork and patience. The auction video surfaced online briefly. Someone had clipped it before HR shut things down. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Enough people saw it. Enough people understood the context once the resignations hit. Sabrina tried to control the narrative. She told friends I'd been distant. That we'd grown apart. That the pressure had broken her. I didn't correct her. Because the truth has a way of surfacing when money is involved. The audit report was brutal. Misuse of funds. Policy violations. A pattern that couldn't be brushed off as a misunderstanding. Sabrina was named. So were the men who'd thought the auction was funny. Settlements followed. Quiet ones. My attorney said I was in a strong position. The documentation helped. The timing helped more. The day the divorce was finalized, I passed the hotel where the party had been held. The banner was gone. Different company. Different celebration. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. A few weeks later, Leonard asked if I'd consider stepping into a larger role. Not because of sympathy. Because I'd proven something about judgment and restraint that night. I accepted. Sometimes people ask me why I didn't stop the auction. Why I didn't shout. Why I didn't walk out. The answer is simple. If I had, I would have ended the night. By staying, I ended the lie. Sabrina wanted an audience. She just didn't realize the story wouldn't be hers to tell in the end. And the man she'd put on that stage, the one she called a loser, turned out to be the only one who walked away with everything that mattered intact.